Well, good morning everybody, and this is a presentation which is in two parts. Partly it will be Peter who will be talking about the figures, what our finances are like, and I've been asked to talk a little bit about how we respond to stewardship. Well, for those of you who were here last weekend when we were celebrating Lee's 10th anniversary, he said in his sermon that when he arrived, he sensed that there was a congregation with some kind of fear, some sense of fear. And the fear was that we are irrelevant in this church, that the Church of England is irrelevant, and we're irrelevant here in Oakham. But what I want to say this morning is that we are the body of Christ in this place, and we need not be afraid. Not afraid because we're not irrelevant. We have a vision. This holy space is first of all a focus for worship. I was accosted by a visitor outside church after last Sunday morning's service, and he said, "Do you know, last week I was in Chichester Cathedral, and I have to tell you that the service this morning was a good deal better even than Chichester Cathedral service." That's high praise, because we have a great quality of worship here. We've got a heart for the poor. The work that we've been doing recently with the food bank pays testament to that. But it's not just about poor in financial terms, but also about the poor in health and spirit as well. I genuinely believe that this is a congregation filled with people who care for each other and for those around them. And all in our different ways, we are trying to model Christ in the world, making disciples of both young and old. And it's great, isn't it, to have a room full of children. We're here building together God's vision. And it's why it's so important that we sustain this local church in its ministry and mission, because we are relevant. Peter, I'm going to hand over to you, and I just want Peter, obviously, will take you through the figures as to what it takes to make that vision real.
Before we actually go into the figures, I'd just like to briefly explain to you where we've taken these figures from. John King and myself, we sat down, looked at last year's figures. They are exact, they've been signed off, they are genuine figures. We've looked at this year's figures, and we've extrapolated those to give us an end of the year figure. And we've then projected those forwards to 2015, 16 and 17. That's the period of the stewardship. And we've taken an average of those 3 years. So the figures you're seeing now are the average of those 3 years. They're pretty close, I would suggest, to what we might expect in 2016. But now the first cost that we have, and the major cost, is parish share. This is pretty well carved in marble. It's set by Peterborough, and it's based on the size of the ministry, the size of the congregations, etc. So that is a figure that we will not be able to adjust. We haven't got the forthcoming years, of course, but we've had to make a guesstimate as to what they might be. Worship and mission. Now, this is the cost of our church services, the music, the charitable giving, all the youth work, and there's a lot of good, honest youth work been going on. As you know, we've recently had a youth intern, and the cost of all that is some £24,000. We then have running expenses of about £37,000. This is the cost of heating, the lighting, insurance, administration, and the minor maintenance, anything from toilet rolls to light bulbs. I would add that the insurance over recent years has gone up quite heftily. We went a period of time without any major increase in insurance. Inevitably, the insurance companies catch up with you. And we've had to have quite sizable increases over the last 2 years. And I think next year, if I'm right, is the last major increase that we will have, and it should get back to an even platform after that. The next major figure is essential maintenance and repair. These are the funds that are needed, 25,000 we've set aside. These are the funds needed for general repair work throughout the church. They are not major project costs. It is not the costs associated with rewiring the church, for example, with whatever major work we may do with the boiler. It is not that cost that's involved in this. These are just genuine, the sort of things identified in the quinquennial evaluation. They're the sort of costs that will go into this. This is making a grand total, therefore, of £193,000. That's the cost of running All Saints over the next 3 years per annum. Roughly, it's going to be £193,000 on average. So how do we raise the income for £193,000? Well, let's start at the bottom. The smallest figure we have is £2,000 income raised from fundraising. Some years we've been over that, but by and large, 2,000 is the figure we've been getting. It's usually from things like the autumn fair, from sales of plants, for example, in the past. It's that sort of fundraising we've been doing. The next figure, 29,000. This is income not by gift aid. These are collections, that's cash collections. They're donations by individuals. They are grants that we receive. We received 2 major grants, one for general use and one for fabric. And fees from weddings and funerals all go into this 29,000 pot. And this gives us, therefore, a shortfall of £162,000, which we need to raise. That is our target, £162,000. And we can achieve this by promise giving of £130,000, because we can claw back from Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs through the gift aid scheme £32,000. So we're looking at a target of donations by the congregation of £130,000. That's quite a task. To put that in perspective, let's look at what we're currently giving. Our current promise giving this year is £88,000, and we claw back about £22,000. So that's quite a hike. In fact, it's a hike of 47%. So it's no mean target. But that is the target, and that's our aspiration for meeting the needs of the church over the next few years.
Well, thank you, Peter. Yeah, that is a very challenging figure. Now, you may be sat there saying, oh, well, I've heard all about stewardship before, know what it's all about. But actually, stewardship isn't just about raising church giving. It's about how we respond, as St. Matthew did, to Christ's call to follow him. And it's about how we use all of God's gifts to us in every part of our lives. So it's not just about the stewardship of our money and our giving. It's about the stewardship of everything we have and everything that we are. What's the question mark in God Desires' question of you? Some? Just a bit? A fair share? We'll come back to that. The unavoidable question in any stewardship campaign, and one with which each of us wrestle as church members, is this: how much? How much should I give? Or rather, how much should I give back? Because everything we have and are comes from God in the first place. Well, there are several models. Old Testament, there's the model of the tithe, which would give 10% back. Or a bit more challenging, the model of the Jubilee year that existed in the Old Testament, where every 50 years the Jewish nation said, we will give back to original owners their land, regardless of whether they've squandered it or not. We will free all of the slaves. We will put things back as they were 50 years ago. Or if you move to the New Testament, Acts 2:42, the disciples held everything in common. Or you might see the model which Jesus puts forward as he challenges the rich young ruler in Luke chapter 18. Sell everything you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me. And then we have the current recommendation from the Church of England, which is 5% of net income. Interesting, I was reading an article in the Church Times recently, and it was about the publication of the Archbishop's Council's financial statistics. It reported record levels of giving across the Church of England, and that the average level of giving per person was around £11, including the tax fund. Now, it all depends on how you make the calculation, but probably the kindest calculation if we made that one here at Oakham, the result would be £10.50, just a little bit less than average. Interesting challenge. Well, I've been asked to share my response. Well, I actually do adopt one of these models. Now, I'm not in a monastic order, so, the kind of having everything in common is unlike, and I've certainly not given it all away, so I'm narrowing down the options. But actually, this is something that people come to prayerfully, what the percentage of income is. But in our house, I guess what we do is we calculate what our income is after tax. Now, some people will say after mortgage as well. And then we calculate what the amount is, adopting the percentage figure that we've agreed on. And that's the figure that we give back, not that phrase, give back to God's work. Now, it's slightly different for me because there are two churches that I worship in. I worship here and I worship in Mallorca, so I give regularly to both. And there are a number of charities, Christian charities, that I also support. But I create a standing order. We create standing orders for all of those particular organisations, so that I don't get to the stage at the end of the month where I'm kind of looking around for cash to meet what I've actually said that I would do. And then I kind of adopt a stress test. Now, does that result in giving, which first of all puts God in first place? Not just occasional, but it's regular. And then is it sacrificial and meaningful? Or is the level of giving us just easy peasy? I mean, one of the acid tests is, what is it that I can't do because of my giving? What is it that I've had to give up because of my giving? And the answer to that, if the answer to that is nothing, and then finally, am I doing that with a thankful and cheerful heart? It's interesting, I was reading again in an article, and this was a quote from the 1999 Church of England report entitled First to the Lord. For those on very high incomes, the challenge to review one's overall lifestyle may be far more significant than the giving away of a modest percentage of income. And there's an interesting dialogue that's now beginning to happen about, not just about the stewardship of income, but the stewardship of capital as well. Put that bluntly, for me, this is God saying, David, should you have 2 houses? Because that's stewardship of capital. So let's come back to that slide that we started with, and the answer is God desires all of you. Yeah, I mean, he desires all of you, but he desires all of each of us individually. You couldn't miss the message in the hymn that we had before the gospel reading. I've been on a course recently. It's a 2-year course at Lorne Abbey, and we had an absolutely fascinating session on where your treasure is. Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. That's one of the sayings that Jesus gives just after he's met with this rich young ruler as he's talking to his disciples. And the warden there at Lorne Abbey was saying, the Christian life is all about dying and death. Our surrendering ourselves. Now, I quoted this in a sermon in Mallorca, and the organist there is a Welshman, Conway, from deep down in South Wales. He said, David, he said, I've always thought that the Christian life is all about life, not death. And of course, Conway is right. But it's about death and life. It's about dying and rising. It's about losing our lives and gaining them. And I believe that that's a journey's end that we'll only find in heaven with the God who loves us and desires all of us. Jesus says, follow me, on a journey to become more fully the body of Christ, because we are the body of Christ in this place. Well, I don't make any apologies for what, in many ways, I think has been a challenging presentation. Peter's figures are, and in a way my response was deliberately challenging, because I believe that this is a time where it's not just a case of saying, well, I'll give what I gave last time, plus a rise for inflation, but rather a time for reassessing in totality where we stand in our discipleship and following Christ. Thank you very much to all of you for listening. Thank you, I know, to everybody who gives really generously now. Thank you for all of that. But please prayerfully think about what your response will be over the coming weeks. There is an envelope at the back of church for everybody. They're in alphabetical order. And if you can't find one with your name on, there are some blank ones there. Please prayerfully think about, read about. There are some fantastic articles on the diocesan website, and I hope we'll get them on ours. And then please come back with your response by October the 19th. And again, thank you very much indeed.